He offered her his last name while the fire climbed his fence line. So why did she step closer instead of running? Flames snap through the dry grass, popping like gunshots as the wind shoves heat against her face. Evelyn grips a dented tin bucket, water sloshing over her boots, while Wade stands 10 steps ahead, not moving, not calling her back. A fence post splits with a sharp crack. Sparks lift, drift, land too close. He turns, just once, and she can't tell if he's warning her or waiting for something else. Tell me, would you trust him? The road into Dry Hollow ran red with dust, the kind that clung to your hem and stayed there like it meant to claim you. Evelyn Brooks walked it slow, one step at a time, her boots worn thin at the heel. The sun sat high and hard, pressing down on the back of her neck. She didn't lift a hand to wipe the sweat. It would only come again. Her satchel hung light against her hip. Too light. She stopped first at the dressmaker's. A bell chimed when she pushed the door. The woman behind the counter looked up, smiled out of habit, then let it fade just as quickly. Evelyn laid a neatly stitched sleeve on the counter. The seams were tight, even, the kind of work that held. The woman didn't touch it. "We're not hiring," she said, already turning away. Evelyn folded the sleeve, slipped it back into her bag, and stepped outside before the bell could ring again. The cafe smelled like coffee gone bitter. A man wiped down the same spot on the counter 3 times while she spoke. He didn't look at her hands, didn't look at anything but the wood beneath his rag. "No help needed," he said. At the general store, a boy barely old enough to shave shook his head before she finished her sentence. By the time she stepped back into the street, the town had gone quiet around her in that way towns do when they've already made up their mind. Evelyn stood there a moment longer than she needed to. A screen door creaked somewhere to her right. Dishes clinked. A chair scraped. She turned toward a narrow place with 2 tables out front, the kind that served whoever walked in and asked plain. A man was stacking plates, moving slow, like the heat had settled into his bones. He wore a dust-streaked shirt, sleeves rolled once, hands rough and steady. Evelyn walked up to the edge of the porch, her fingers tightened on the strap of her satchel. For a second, nothing came out. Then she said it. "I ain't pretty, but I can cook." The man didn't laugh, didn't frown. He just looked at her once. It wasn't a long look, but it didn't slide off her either. It stayed just long enough to take in the dust on her dress, the way she held herself upright, the way her hand didn't shake even when everything else did. He set the last plate down. "Then marry me," he said. Evelyn blinked. The word hung there between them, strange and solid all at once. "I need a wife before the court meets tomorrow." No smile, no explanation, just that. A wagon rattled past behind her. Someone laughed across the street. The world kept moving like nothing had changed. Evelyn glanced down at her satchel. She could feel the coins inside, few enough to count without opening it. She knew what a room cost in this town, knew how many nights she had left. She looked back at him. He hadn't moved. The wind shifted, lifting a corner of her skirt, carrying the smell of dust and hot wood. Evelyn let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "All right," she said. Her voice came out steady. "All right." The man nodded once, like a deal had been struck over a fence line. "Wade Colburn," he said. Evelyn gave a small nod of her own. "Evelyn Brooks." He stepped off the porch, boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. Up close, he smelled faintly of leather and sun. He didn't reach for her, didn't offer anything more. "Judge keeps his office open till sundown," Wade said. We ride now, we make it. Evelyn turned once, just once, and looked back at the town. No one was watching anymore. She shifted her satchel higher on her shoulder and followed him. The red dust rose behind their steps, then settled back into place like she'd never been there at all. The judge's office sat between a barber shop and a narrow apothecary that smelled of camphor and dried herbs. A crooked sign hung above the door, tapping soft against its chain in the wind. Wade pushed it open without knocking. Inside, the air was cooler, paper and ink, a clock ticking somewhere behind the wall. The judge didn't look surprised. "Colburn," he said, adjusting his spectacles. His eyes moved once to Evelyn, then back to the page in front of him. "You're cutting it close." Wade took off his hat. "That's the idea." No one asked Evelyn if she was sure. The paper was set out, a pen laid across it. The judge spoke the words in a voice that had said them too many times to count. Evelyn listened without catching all of it. Her name came clear. She stepped forward when he nodded. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Evelyn Brooks. The ink bled a little at the end of the S. She didn't fix it. Wade signed after her, quick, clean, like he was marking a tally. The judge stamped the page. The sound was flat and final. "That'll hold," he said. Outside, the sun had dropped lower, taking some of the heat with it. A breeze moved through the street, lifting dust in thin sheets. Wade didn't speak as he led her to a horse tied at the hitching rail. He swung up first, then reached down. Not looking at her, Evelyn took his hand. His grip was firm, steady, nothing more. He pulled her up behind him. They rode out of Dry Hollow without looking back. The land opened wide past the last row of buildings. Dry grass stretched out, pale and brittle, bending under the wind. Fence posts leaned where they stood. Far off, a line of hills cut the horizon in a dull blue. They rode in silence. Evelyn kept her hands light at his sides, just enough to keep her seat. The rhythm of the horse settled into her bones after a while. Hooves on hard ground, leather creaking, the wind filling the spaces between. By the time the ranch came into view, the sun was low enough to throw long shadows across the land. Colburn Ridge stood higher than the fields around it. A wide house, wood gone gray with years. A barn off to the side. Corrals fenced in rough, straight lines. Everything set firm, like it had been built to last, whether anyone stayed or not. A man stood near the gate, arms folded across his chest. He watched them ride in. Wade slowed the horse. "That's Silas Boone," he said, like he was naming a tool. "He runs things when I'm off." Silas didn't step forward, didn't offer a hand. His eyes moved over Evelyn once, from her boots to her face, then back again. "That her?" he asked. "That's her." Silas nodded once, like a box had been checked. Wade slid down and tied the reins. Evelyn followed slower, her legs stiff from the ride. When her boots hit the ground, the dust puffed up around them. "Kitchen's through the back," Wade said. "Room's off to the left." No welcome. No explanation. Just directions. Inside, the house was clean in a way that felt empty. A table, 4 chairs, a stove with ash still warm in the belly, a shelf with 3 cups, all turned the same way. Evelyn set her satchel down near the wall. She moved to the stove without asking, opened it, checked the wood, found a small stack by the door. She knelt, set the pieces in place, struck a match from a tin she found on the shelf. The flame caught slow, then steady. There were beans in a sack, cornmeal in a tin, a piece of salt pork wrapped in cloth, enough to make something that held. She worked quiet, measured by hand, stirred with a wooden spoon worn smooth from use. The smell came up after a while, filling the room, pushing back the emptiness just a little. Wade came in as the light outside faded. He washed his hands at the basin, dried them on a cloth, then sat. Evelyn set a bowl in front of him, then one for herself. She sat across, not touching the table with her elbows. He ate without hurry. No sound but the spoon and the wind at the door. Halfway through, he stopped. Not long, just enough to notice. Then he finished. He set the spoon down, looked at the bowl once more, then at the table. "You can stay," he said. Evelyn nodded. Nothing else. She cleared the bowls, rinsed them in a basin, set them upside down to dry. When she was done, she took her satchel and walked to the small room off the side. The bed was narrow, a blanket folded at the foot, a window that faced the fence line. She closed the door. Outside, she heard boots on wood. Then the creak of the porch. Wade didn't come in. The wind picked up as the night settled. It pushed against the walls, found the gaps, made its way inside in thin, steady breaths. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed for a while before lying down. She kept her boots on. Through the window, she could see the porch in shadow. A shape out there. Still. Not leaving. Not coming closer either. Morning came thin and pale over Colburn Ridge. The wind had settled some, but it still moved through the fence lines, brushing the dry grass in long strokes. Evelyn stepped out onto the porch with a tin cup in her hand. Coffee, weak and hot enough to hold. Wade was already gone. The yard had that early quiet to it. A saddle leaned against the post, a bucket by the well half full. Work had started before light. She drank slow, watching the horizon. By the time she stepped inside again, boots sounded outside. 2 men came in through the back without knocking, dust on their coats. One of them nodded once at her. The other didn't bother. "Morning," the first said. Evelyn returned the nod. Nothing more. They sat, ate what she put down without comment. One of them glanced at her hands as she set the plate, noticed the clean lines of the bread, the way the eggs were done just right. He said nothing about that either. Outside, she heard a low voice. Silas Boone. He stood near the corral, speaking with Wade. Evelyn couldn't catch the words, only the tone. Flat, practical, the kind of talk that didn't leave room for anything extra. When Wade came in, he didn't look at her right away. He washed, dried his hands, and sat. She set his plate down. Their fingers didn't touch. "You'll want to keep to the house," he said after a moment. "Town talks." Evelyn set the spoon beside the bowl. "It already does." He didn't argue. The first time she went into Dry Hollow after that, it was for flour and salt. She walked in alone. Head up. Same as before. Nothing had changed. A pair of women stood outside the general store. Their voices dropped when she passed, but not enough. "That's her," one of them said. "4th one this year, ain't it?" Evelyn didn't slow, didn't turn. Inside, the shopkeeper set the sack on the counter without meeting her eye. She paid in coins, counted exact. When she stepped back out, the wind had picked up again, carrying the dust down the street in thin lines. At the edge of the square, a young woman stood near a polished carriage. Clean dress, gloves, even in the heat. She watched Evelyn cross. "Mrs. Colburn," she said, like it was something to try on. Evelyn stopped. "Clara Whitfield," the woman said. "My father owns the East Ridge past the creek." Evelyn gave a small nod. Clara smiled, but it didn't settle right. "Heard you cook, I do." "Good," Clara said. "You'll be useful then." The words hung there, light and sharp. Evelyn didn't answer. She stepped past her, the boards of the walkway creaking underfoot. Behind her, she heard the soft tap of Clara's heels, turning away. That night, the house felt smaller. Evelyn stayed in the kitchen after the dishes were done. The lamp burned low. She opened a drawer near the table, looking for a cloth, and found a ledger instead. She didn't mean to read it, but the pages were already open. Numbers ran straight down the columns. Feed, tools, wages. Clean, simple entries. Then something else. A line that repeated. $50. Same day each month. No name beside it. No note. Evelyn turned the page. There it was again. And again. She ran her finger down the margin. The ink was darker on those lines, pressed harder. Outside, a board creaked. She closed the book. Wade stepped in, hat low, dust on his shoulders. "You're up late," he said. "So are you." He set his hat on the hook. His eyes moved to the table, then back to her. Not asking, just noticing. Evelyn wiped her hands on a cloth. "You pay someone $50 every month." The room went still. For what? Wade didn't answer right away. He walked to the basin, poured water, washed the dust from his hands. "Ranch business," he said. "That don't have a name?" He dried his hands, folded the cloth once. Some things don't. Evelyn watched him. The way he stood. The way he didn't look away, but didn't give anything either. Outside, the wind pressed against the door. That night, she didn't sleep right. Sometime past midnight, she heard the horse. Soft at first, then clearer. Hooves on hard ground. Evelyn rose, quiet, and moved to the window. Wade rode out alone. No lantern, just the shape of him against the dark. She waited a moment, then stepped back. The next morning, Dry Hollow felt different. Word had moved. At the far end of the street, a man stood near the well, dressed too clean for the dust around him, hat tipped low, coat pressed. He watched her before she saw him. When she did, he smiled, slow. "You don't know who you married," he said, stepping into her path like it was nothing at all. Evelyn stopped. The wind lifted the edge of her sleeve. "Name's Barrett Kane," he went on. "Figure you ought to know what you've stepped into." She didn't answer, didn't move, just held his gaze a moment longer than needed, then stepped around him and kept walking. Behind her, she could feel his eyes follow, and for the first time since she'd come to Colburn Ridge, something shifted. Not fear, something colder. Like the ground under her boots wasn't as steady as it had been the day before. The wind came up before dusk. Evelyn felt it first at the back door, the hinge giving a soft groan each time the gusts pressed against it. She set a stone against the frame to keep it from swinging. The sky had gone a dull, heavy color, the kind that made the hills look farther away than they were. Silas passed through the yard, moving quicker than usual. He didn't stop to talk, just checked the fences, then the barn, then the far end of the corral. Evelyn watched from the porch. Something wasn't right. She stepped down into the yard, the dust already lifting in small spirals around her boots. "What's coming?" she asked when Silas crossed back. "Wind," he said. "That all?" Silas hesitated. "Just for a second. Keep the doors shut tonight." He moved on before she could ask more. Evelyn turned toward the house, then stopped. Out past the fence line, near the stretch of dry brush that marked the edge of the property, a figure stood. Still. Watching. Wade. He wasn't alone. 2 other men stood with him, their horses tied a short distance away. One of them she recognized without meaning to. Barrett Kane. Even from where she stood, she could tell by the way he held himself. Easy, like he owned whatever ground he stepped on. Evelyn didn't move closer. She stayed where she was, the wind pulling at her skirt, carrying pieces of their voices that never quite reached her. Wade didn't look toward the house. He stood facing Kane, arms at his sides, listening. Then Kane stepped closer, said something low. Wade didn't answer, didn't step back either. Evelyn felt her fingers tighten against her palm. The wind rose sharper, cutting across the yard. A loose board struck against the side of the barn with a hollow knock. Then the men turned. Kane mounted his horse first. The others followed. In a moment, they were riding off along the ridge, the dust trailing behind them like a shadow. Wade stayed a second longer. Then he turned back toward the ranch. By the time he reached the yard, the first smell of smoke was already in the air. Faint. But there. Evelyn turned her head. "You smell that?" Wade didn't answer. His eyes had already moved past her, toward the far end of the fields. A thin line of gray rose where the brush ran dry. Then another. The wind caught it. The fire came fast after that. It moved low at first, sliding through the grass, then lifting when it found the wood stacked near the outer fence. Flames jumped, caught, spread. The sound came next, a crackle that turned into a steady roar. "Horses," Wade said. Evelyn didn't wait. She ran for the corral, the heat already pressing against her face. The horses stamped and pulled, eyes wide, ropes tight. She worked the knots with hands that didn't quite feel like her own, fingers slipping once before finding the loop. "Easy," she said, low, steady. The first rope came free, then the next. Behind her, Wade moved through the yard, grabbing buckets, kicking open the water trough, sending a rush of muddy water spilling toward the fence line. The wind shifted again, stronger. It carried sparks now. One landed near the barn door, another skittered across the ground and died in the dust. Evelyn dragged a bucket toward the edge of the flames, threw what she could. The water hit the ground and vanished into steam. It wasn't enough. Nothing about it felt like enough. "Back!" Wade's voice cut through the noise. She didn't move, not right away. The fence post near her cracked, the top splitting with a sharp snap. Flame ran up the wood, fast and bright. Evelyn stepped back then, just as Wade reached her. His hand caught her wrist. Firm. For a second, everything else dropped away. The heat, the wind, the noise. Just that grip. Then he pulled her clear, moving her back toward the yard. "You stay clear of the line," he said. His voice wasn't raised. Didn't need to be. Evelyn pulled her arm free once she had her footing. "You were with him," she said. Not loud. But it landed. Wade looked at her then. Really looked. The firelight caught in his eyes, made them harder to read. "I was where I needed to be," he said. "That's what this is." He didn't answer. Behind them, the fire shifted again, pushing along the edge instead of toward the house. It slowed where the ground turned bare, where the brush thinned. Silas and the other hands were there now, beating at the flames with wet sacks, cutting a line in the dirt to keep it from crossing. Piece by piece, the fire lost ground. Not all at once, but enough. By the time the worst of it burned out, the sky had gone dark. Smoke hung low over the fields, drifting in slow, heavy waves. The ranch still stood. The barn was blackened along one side. The fence gone in places. But the house, whole. Evelyn stood near the well, her hands raw, her sleeves damp and streaked with ash. Wade came up beside her. Close. Not touching. "You should get inside," he said. She didn't move. Did you know? She asked. Another pause. The wind had dropped. The night settled in quiet around them, broken only by the soft crack of something still burning out in the field. Wade looked out over the dark. I knew enough, he said. Evelyn let out a breath that didn't ease anything. She turned then, walked past him, back toward the house. Behind her, she could feel his presence still, not reaching, not leaving, and somehow that felt worse than either. Morning came slow. Smoke still hung low over the fields, drifting in thin gray lines that caught the early light. The air smelled of wet ash and scorched grass. Somewhere out near the fence, a board creaked loose in the wind. Evelyn stood at the kitchen table with a cloth in her hands, wiping the same spot twice without noticing. The coffee had gone cold beside her. Boots sounded outside. More than one pair. She set the cloth down. By the time she stepped onto the porch, 3 riders had come through the gate. One wore a badge pinned to his vest. Another carried a leather case under his arm. Papers. Official. Wade stood in the yard already, waiting. Evelyn stayed at the top of the steps. No one called her down. The man with the badge dismounted first. Wade Colburn, he said, like he'd said it before. That's right. We've got cause to search your land. Complaint filed late last night. Wade nodded once. You'll find what you came for. No argument. No surprise. Evelyn felt that again. That shift under her feet. The men moved past him, out toward the burned edge of the fields. Silas followed, silent, his face set hard. Time stretched. Evelyn stayed where she was, the porch rail warm under her hand. After a while, voices carried back. Not loud, not clear, but different now, sharper. Then one word came clean through the wind. Kane. Another pause. Then movement. 2 of the riders came back first, leading a 3rd man between them. Barrett Kane. His coat was dusted with ash, his hat gone. The easy look he wore before had slipped some, though not all the way. He glanced up once, caught sight of Evelyn on the porch, and gave the smallest shake of his head, almost a laugh. Morning, he said, like they'd met for business. No one answered him. The man with the badge stepped forward. You're under arrest pending investigation, he said. Arson attempt, among other things. Kane's smile didn't hold. He looked at Wade then. Longer this time. You think this settles anything? He said. Wade didn't move. It settles enough. Kane let out a breath through his nose. You've been feeding us crumbs for months. Wade's eyes didn't shift. You kept coming back for more. The words sat there, plain. Evelyn's grip tightened on the rail. Months. The ledger. The $50. Kane laughed once, short. Should have known. You don't pay a man like that unless you're buying time. No, Wade said. I pay to see who shows up to collect. Silence followed. Then the badge man pulled Kane toward the horse. The others moved with him. Dust kicked up under their boots as they turned out of the yard. Kane didn't look back again. The sound of hooves faded slow, then gone. The yard settled. Evelyn stepped down off the porch. She walked across the dirt, each step measured until she stood a few feet from Wade. He hadn't moved, not toward her, not away. You knew, she said. Not a question. Wade gave a small nod. Enough to wait. And the fire? Part of what he thought he could take, Wade said, needed him to make a move where it could be seen. Evelyn looked past him, out toward the blackened stretch of land. You could have told me. Another pause. I could have, he said. No excuse, no explanation. Just that. The wind shifted again, softer now. Evelyn let out a breath. Her hands still felt raw from the night before. Her sleeves still smelled faintly of smoke. You let me stand in it, she said. Wade's gaze dropped once to her hands, then back up. You didn't step back. Evelyn held his eyes. For a long second, neither of them spoke. Then she turned, walked back toward the house. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Weeks passed. The burned fence was rebuilt. New posts driven into the ground, straight and firm. The barn wall got patched where the boards had split. The smell of smoke faded from the air, replaced by dust and hay and the usual work of the place. Evelyn took over the kitchen without asking. Then the ledger. She sat at the table in the evenings, lamp low, going through the numbers line by line, cleaning them up, setting them right. The $50 line didn't come back. Silas stopped looking at her like she didn't belong. Not all at once, but enough. One afternoon, the wind died down to nothing. The kind of still that made every sound carry farther. Evelyn stood at the table, sorting receipts, when Wade came in. He set his hat down, watched her a moment. You could have left, he said. Evelyn didn't look up right away. She finished the column she was working on, set the pencil down, then lifted her eyes. I could have, she said. Nothing more. The space between them felt different now. Not empty. Not full either. Just there. Evelyn rested her hand on the table. Not reaching. Just there. After a second, Wade set his hand down too. Close. Not touching. Outside, a small figure ran across the yard, chasing after a loose scrap of cloth the wind had finally let go. Laughter carried back toward the house, light and quick. Evelyn turned her head toward the sound. The dust rose under those small feet, then settled again, same as always. Only now, it didn't feel like it erased anything. Wade stayed where he was, and this time, he didn't leave. If you stood where Evelyn stood that evening, you might not call it love. Not at first. Not the kind people write about in letters or promise under bright lights. It didn't come with easy words. It didn't ask for anything. It just stayed. Maybe you've known a moment like that, when someone could have walked away, had every reason to, and still, they didn't. Out on that stretch of dry land, nothing came easy. Not trust, not belonging, not even a place to rest your name. But sometimes, it isn't the grand gestures that hold a life together. It's the quiet choices, the ones made without witnesses, the ones that don't need explaining. Evelyn didn't find a home because someone handed it to her. She built it, piece by piece in the space between doubt and staying. And Wade, he learned that standing beside someone could mean more than saying anything at all. Maybe that's what matters in the end. Not who arrives first, not who says the right thing, but who stays when it would be easier not to. If this story felt close to something you've lived, tell me where you're listening from. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, quiet, steady, and full of the kind of truth that lingers, there's a place for you here.